Hello guys, today I'm going to be showing you how to do a head rig. I found that there aren't a lot of accessible tutorials online about how to make a really simple universal head rig that can work for both low poly models and high poly models, so I kind of designed mine. I'm going to show you how I do it. It seems to work really well, especially for like posing for your portfolio or just doing really simple face animations. So I can show you how I do this from complete scratch. I'm actually going to hide the body so I have only this head mesh here. And I'm going to show you beforehand that I've separated the eyes on their own, and I've got the head rig here, the head mesh I mean. Here's the poly structure of it. It's fairly complex, so you can see that this will work on most high poly models that have been retopologized. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do this from complete scratch, so even if you're a beginner, you can follow this. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on screencast so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to left click the cursor so that it's in the middle of the neck here. I'm going to make sure I'm in object mode with the head selected. I'm going to shift A, armature, and single bone. So you're not going to be able to see it initially, so I'm just going to X-ray so you can see the octahedral bone through it. I'm going to hide this mesh over here, we don't need to see that right now, and I'm going to make sure I'm selecting the armature bone and I'm in edit mode. The different modes dictate different actions of the armature. Pose mode is for moving and posing the character, and edit mode is for all changes made to the mesh that will be the armature that will be permanent. So I'm going to be in edit mode of the armature, and I'm going to shrink this down until it's about the size of the head. Let's just do that. Okay. So you're going to want that to go from relatively about the end of the jaw here under the ear to top of the head around there. So first you have that bone. So the very first thing I want to do is I want to take this mesh and I want to take this bone, this armature bone, and put it into pose mode so that this blue line is around it. Select the mesh so it's in yellow, shift select that bone, control P, so that you can parent that mesh to the bone. What that means is I have taken the mesh and I've said, I want this bone to control it 100%, so I'm going to make this bone the parent. And parent bones just have complete control over things. You can see that the eyes have not been parented, so they're just kind of floating in space. What I'm going to do is I'm going to press Alt-R and Alt-G to reset that posing's rotation. I'm going to select those eyes. I'm actually going to, looks like I have a mirror modifier on them, I'm going to apply that. And I'm actually going to separate those eyes. So I have this eye on the left, which I'm going to call I.L, and this eye on the right, which I'm going to call I.R, just for the moment. So I have these two different eyes, and I have the mesh. So I'm going to select both of those eyes, and I'm going to reselect that bone in pose mode. So again, that's the eyes in object mode. And then shift selecting this armature that's already been put into pose mode, control P, and then bone. And this way, we've got everything controlled by this one bone. This is important because the head bone is going to be the base and kind of the anchor for everything on the face. Like the eyes will need to be parented to the head so like the eyebrows move with the head when we change that. So what I'm going to do is from here I'm going to go back into edit mode of the armature. For selecting it, I'm going to go into edit mode because you want permanent changes to be made in the edit mode of the armature. I'm going to shift D so I can duplicate one of these armature bones, and I'm going to move it just about here. I'm going to start with the eyebrows just so I can show you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this into place. I'll be doing 3 for the eyebrows, 1 for here so she can frown, here so it's like a lift, and here. Real simple. I don't want too many bones. Too many bones kind of confuse me. I just want to keep this as basic as possible. And so these bones will be used to control that skin once we've attached it. You can think of as little handles. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put another 3 of these above the eyelid like that. There we go. And then I'm just going to put 1 here. I don't really think you need more than that. If you want more than that, you'll have a more complex rig, and there are better tutorials about making really complex rigs, but this is just basic. So I'm going to take this bone again, and I'm going to shift D down to the corner of the mouth. So I have one there that's controlling it. I'm going to put one here, right above the lip, right there. I'm going to shift D and drag that down, just so I have one there. I'm actually going to select all these bones and go into the Bone Panel tab and just change them to stick so I can see what I'm doing a little better. So we've got most of our bones set already. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this main head bone, Shift D, and rotate it so that it's roughly in line with the jaw here. Okay? Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select all these bones. I'm going to Control P, and I'm going to then select the head bone. So the bones that are going to be controlled by the head bone is the most important, so we select it last. Control P, keep offset. You'll see these lines kinds of pop up, and I'll show you what we did there. You can see that all of the sub bones are following the head bone now. If we hadn't parented them, they would have just stayed in space, just like the eyes did. So now everything's parented together, everything's smooth. So right now we don't have any influence, we haven't added any weight. What we're going to do now is you should name them. So I'm going to go into the end panel and just name these as such. So this first one I'm going to name eyebrow 1.L. I'm going to name this one eyebrow 2.L. Then I'm going to name that eyebrow 3.L. I'm going to name this one eyelid 1.L. I'm going to name this one eyelid 2.L. And this one's going to be eyelid 3.L. This will be lower lid.L. I'm going to name this one upper lip.L. This will be mouth corner.L. And this one will be lower lip.L. So I'm just going to quickly flip that over to the other side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click in the center of the model. I'm going to press period to line up my cursor so that when we flip it over, it'll be directly symmetrical. In edit mode, I'm going to select those bones I just made, only on this this left half of the face. I'm going to Shift D to duplicate them. And then I'm going to press W and symmetrize. And that's perfectly in place because we did this. We lined it up in the center. And if you notice, it has switched to the names for us, so these are all .R, which is really nice. So now we've got the basics of this face rib set up. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pray that assign automatic weights works here. So we'll see. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into armature mode, and we're going to go into pose mode. I'm going to select everything. We're going to select this mesh, shift select the armature. So we've got orange and blue, Control P with automatic weights. And then we wait, and let's see what happened. So you're going to want to press comma to get your cursor back. So we see we've got the head bone still controlling everything. We've got the jawbone trying to work here. The reason it's not working is because some of the control for the mouth is being given to these bones here. So you can see that works, and that works. We can see that's working there. So what we're going to do is we're going to select these lips. I'm actually just going to select these bottom ones. And I'm going to shift select what should be the boss of them, Control P, and keep offset. And hopefully this will make sense now. The lips still have their control of the mouth. But now we're saying that when I bring the jaw down, I want these to follow. So you can use this technique whenever you need something to follow. Just checking all those. That's a little weak. We're gonna have to modify that. Okay. But for the most part, we've got something that seems like it's gonna work. So the first thing I want to do is I want to fix up some of the weighting on this. It's not perfect. It's pretty good, but it's not perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the mesh and go into weight paint mode. We saw here that these were not controlling it very well, so I'm just going to add some weight here. I open this up just by pressing T. This is the weight painting menu. I'm going to make the radius a little bit larger. That's just controlling the brush size, and I'm going to drop the weight and the strength down. That just means that I'm going to have less controlled with my painting. So if I turn the weight all the way up, you'd see that the red means it's getting a lot of control. It's going to bend kind of unnaturally. So if I just use a small amount of weight, a small amount of influence, it's going to turn this light blue color, and it's only going to have a little bit of influence. So I like to start off doing it kind of slow, just to make sure that we're getting it. And another reason this bone is not really controlling it as well as this bone over here is that the eyebrows are exerting a lot of influence on the eyelid bone. The way weight painting works is that bones have influence over certain areas of the face, and they kind of compete with each other. So if this eyebrow bone is controlling the eyelid bone itself is going to have less control over the actual thing, the actual eyelid itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to erase this influence I put inside that I don't need. So I'm actually going to erase some of the influence of the eyelid, of the eyebrow on the eyelid. See here, now the eyebrow isn't going to control that. I don't really like when the eyebrow controls that very much. It kind of messes some stuff up. So now we'll see that this has more control over itself. And it's the same with this. Like, this is supposed to be the corner of the eye. We don't need this influence here. I'm going to bring up the strength a little just so I can erase this faster. We don't want any of this being controlled by that eyelid. I'm going to erase this influence as well. We don't need that. I'm also going to erase its influence over here. I don't think that's super necessary. I like to erase on a relatively low weight just so I don't accidentally erase something. You want to make it look as smooth as possible, and when you weight paint with a really small amount, it's easier to make that transition a little smoother. So like right now, that's a bit awkward. Just going to erase that. Keep getting that down. Actually, I weight painted a little weirdly, so I'm just going to manually paint that on. You have to do this sometimes if it doesn't auto weight paint it very well. So I'm just going to make sure nothing is being influenced by this bone. I'm going to make sure I have it selected and I've erased all of the influence so I can paint it in myself. And I'm just going to gently kind of add in where I'd like that bone to control. For this one over here, it's actually controlling the ear. You can see a little bit of that influence on the ear here. I'm just going to erase that. Okay, so that looks good. I'm just gonna finally erase all the influence from here. That's good. Maybe it's going a little high. Okay, now I'm just going to do that same thing with the other side. I just want to make sure everything is doing the right thing. Just gonna clean this up and go quickly here. I just want to mention, if you mess it up and you don't like what you've done, you can just press W and assign automatic from bones, and it'll just kind of redo what it had initially, so you can just start again. Okay, now that you've done that, I'm just going to erase some of this influence on the mouth and the nose. It's a little bit all over the place. A lot of fixing these meshes is literally just, a lot of making a face rig is literally just all these small adjustments. It's kind of annoying. So I'm going to add just a tiny bit to the nose here, so it kind of has this like natural bend to it that kind of happens when you sneer. And I'm also just going to add a little bit over here, so that lifts up a little, because when you sneer, that part tends to go up. But just subtly, I think. Actually, I'm not even going to do that. There we go. I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. I'm going to This seems pretty good. That seems good. It's controlling more of the neck than I want it to, so I'm just going to erase that influence on the neck. There we go. I think that's pretty satisfactory. So if I go back into object mode, and I go into its material mode and I check how my mesh is doing, that makes sense. She smiles pretty realistically. That works. There's a couple more things that I would probably want to change and just adjust, but I'm not going to bore you with just all my weight painting. So this is the gist of it. The more you adjust and the more you erase, the better it gets. So that's the essence of the basic face rig. Okay, the last thing I want to show you how to do is how to track the eyes. Right now, we've got the head rigged, but the eyes aren't really doing anything. So what we're going to want to do then, so we're going to want to add an eye tracking bone, something that the eyes can look at and that you can drag around that will control them. So I'm going to go into edit mode and I'm going to rotate about like this, and I'm going to make it so that it's flat like that, and it's going to go right in between those two pupils. Drag it out a little bit. So this left eye is going to track this dot here, and this right eye is going to track this dot here. So when you move this around, the eyes will follow it as if it's looking at it. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into our eyes. You want to make sure that the origin is centered at the back of the eyelid, right in the center, because when you rotate the eye, it needs to be able to rotate on an axis that makes sense. An easy way to do that for me, I found out, let me get that back into place, is to just, if you can't find a way to get the origin right there, an easy way to do that is to add a plane and shrink it, and then put that plane wherever you want the origin to be. This is just a quick tip, may not be relevant, but I'll just show you guys real quick anyway. Put it where you want it to be, and you can see that the cursor is there now, and so you do Shift S, cursor to selected, so that you've got your cursor right there, and you can delete the plane, and you'll see that you've got your cursor right where you want it to be, and then you can select the mesh that you want the origin point to be controlled of, and you can Shift, Control, Alt, C, and then origin to 3D cursor, and then that way you've got the origin exactly where you want it, and you can have the eye rotate freely. Okay, so now that we've got the origin in the place we want, so that it can actually rotate correctly, we're going to want to track those eyes to this bone here. So select I.L, and you're going to want to go into this panel that has a little chain on it and add a track to object constraint. So we want these eyes to track to this bone here, so we're going to select the armature, and then we're going to select the eye track, which I have not named yet. Let me name that, eye track. And there we go. We're going to select eye track. You're going to notice that it flips around, and the reasoning for that is that we need to make sure the axes are correct. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the eye that we haven't done anything yet, and I'm going to turn on axis. You can see that the Y here is pointing up. So when we go to our object constraint, it's going to say up should be Y. And that should work. And if you get this little red pinkish icon, that means it's not working. So we need to change that so that it's the correct axis. So we know here Y is up, X is out, and Z is front. And we want that axis to be the same. Y is up and Z is out. So that should look correct. Now we check to see if that's working, and it's working. So after that, you're going to want to do the second eye. So you're going to want to add a track 2 constraint to the armature and then the eye track. It's going to go crazy again. And then you'll want to track it to the same thing. You're going to want to do up axis is Y. Since that's the case, we're going to want it to be the same. So I'm going to do Y, see it's Z. So these two are exactly the same. Their constraints are identical. And to fix this, we're going to change this to tail. That way this eye is looking at the tail end of this, and this eye is looking at that end of that. So I hope that makes sense. So we're just going to have our object constraint. It's going to track it to the eye, and we're going to configure these settings here so that the axes are correct. And you want to make sure that this isn't pink or it's not going to work. And then you'll see amazingly that it works. The last thing I want to do is I'm just going to parent the eye track to the head. That way the eyes will follow. Okay, one last time, let's see. Perfect, and then, as you can be a little sassy, you'd want to have a mouth in there. That would really sell the realism of this. And that's a simple face rig. Hope you enjoyed this. This fit rig should work for pretty much any model. You can do this the same exact tactic on low poly models and high poly models. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you later.